Hi everyone, join me today as we paint this cute bookshop in ink and watercolor. Supplies for today: I've got a spray bottle, a palette of paints, and an area or a separate palette for mixing, tissue paper, water, eraser. I've got 2 pencils, an HB clutch and a 2B graphite, a Pigma Micron permanent liner pen size 03 or 05 would do, and I'm using my silver black velvet round brushes sizes 6 and 8, a ruler, and then I'm going to be using my Baohong 100% cotton cold press paper that I've cut into about an A4 size. Today I'm going to show the entire process, including the sketch diagram. Normally I start with the sketch already on the page, but there have been some requests to show the sketching process as well. The reason why I don't often show the sketching process is that it does take me time. I'm not one of those artists that can just put pencil or ink straight on the page and not have to do multiple erasing to get the sketch correct. So, for example, I have already sketched this bookshop in preparation for this tutorial, and this took me an evening because I'm quite pedantic about scale and getting things correct, and so this really did take me a lot of time. It also is now looking quite architectural, that the lines are incredibly straight and the angles are all very correct, and I'm not going to want to do that by the time I get my ink and watercolor down. I'm going to want to use my pen to do my lines freehand. So I'm kind of doing the best of both worlds, because I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time doing the sketch and also doing erasing as I make errors along the way. So as a guide, if you are wanting to do this with me, I took this preparation sketch that I had done, I got tracing paper and I put it on top, and I just mapped out some key points just so that I'm not having to erase as I'm doing the sketch with you in a moment. And also, if you're wanting to use this prep template that I have made, you can do the same thing with me, where I'm going to trace this onto my watercolor paper and use the guides. These measurements here in between the dots are in millimeters. I won't put those numbers in when I trace it onto my watercolor paper. It's just for your reference if you don't have tracing paper or you're wanting to put this on your paper before you start. If you don't want to put any prep down at all, then you can skip to the section where I've already got this on the paper, and you can do it freehand with me straight in ink if you wish. But I'm going to prep this to go on the watercolor paper. I've put this in ink on the top. I'm going to turn the tracing paper over. I'm going to use a 2B pencil and just go over all of my dots and marks in pencil first. Alright, I'm going to get my watercolor paper now. This is a Baohong 100% cotton cold press paper. I buy it on a roll and I've cut it to about an A4 size. I'm going to get some press stick or blue tack. I like to just put it on the top, because then I'm able to lift the sheet and see if I am missing anything. So I'll turn it over, stick it down, and then I'm going to use a sharper pencil and just put those marks down. The reason I've put these 2 lines in there, the 2 longest lines on the sketch, and it's often quite difficult if you're doing freehand and pen to get that completely straight. So I'm going to do a couple of markers for myself. I still want to have the freehand pen when I put it down, but I just don't want to go wildly wrong. And then I'm going to mark the dots. And I put the flower pots and basket in just because they fall in front of the important lines that we're going to put down. But it just gives us a bit of perspective and getting them in the right place. And then these perspective lines here are important to make it look three-dimensional and realistic. So, and we'll put our paving stones using these lines as a guide. But to make it look realistic, you'll see that the central line is straight down, and then the lines start fanning out to the left and to the right on either side. So I'm just going to plot those. We're actually going to work between these lines, so I don't mind putting the whole line down. Alright, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to remove my tracing paper and tape my paper to the table. So maybe before we get our ink work down, we want to get a few key pencil lines down. And if I do that, I'll also do the pencil lines in around the same order that I did them in the original sketch, just so that you can see my thinking. So the first thing was the windows of the bookshop are bay windows, so the middle piece is further forward than the rest. So it was important that I determined where those bay windows were. I suppose what I did was I started with the door first, and that became the center. That's the center of the sketch. So the door was here with a door frame. Then I knew that there were going to be two bay windows in the middle, and that the two pieces on either side were going to be foreshortened, so they're not going to be quite as wide. So a little bit of an angle outwards. And then the front bay window. And then the second window going back. And then there's going to be the, what's it called? The awning that goes over the front. Alright, that we know. As I said, these long lines are the difficult ones to get straight. I'm going to do a little bit of a dip. And alright, let's do the door. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap, and then the door's going to be ajar. And then let's do the separation. There's going to be the little bottom portion. It's important that it's the same level on both sides, so that's why if you've got a ruler, I just don't have one at hand, I'm just making sure that they are the same height. And likewise, I'm just going to go up a little bit and put a marker there for the ones that are behind. And you can see now, I mean, that's what I started with. And then it's important to put your pots in first, because if I'm going to pick up my ink pen now, I want to make sure that I don't put the lines of the building over where the pots are, as well as their contents. So I'm going to put the bushes in as well, so that I'll actually start with those because they are at the front, and then do all my ink work behind. And there was the basket here. Alright, so for me, especially as a beginner, I and even now I'm not a beginner, but myself, I like to get that down on the page. It just makes the inks parts a little bit more enjoyable and less stressful. So I'm going to use a Pigma Micron permanent liner pen in a size 03. You can use a 05 if you've got whatever you've got on hand. Just make sure that the ink inside your pen is archival or waterproof so that it doesn't run when we put our watercolor down. So as I said, let's start with the pot plants first. And I think actually what I'll do is, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to let music play whilst I do my sketching. Just some points to note whilst I am sketching. I'm working with a loose hand. I want a little bit of a wiggle in my lines as I do them. If they are not completely straight, all the better. And yeah, just to make it a little bit more whimsical and not quite so rigid. So sketch along with me. have now erased all of the pencil off my sketch and done a scan of the sketch at this stage for those of you who are wanting to trace and start from this point. But before I get on to my painting, I just want to pick up my pen one more time. At this point, what I've done is so light it might as well be a pencil sketch, and we don't have to do this as ink and watercolor if we don't want to. But if we are using our ink pen, then let's let it do a little bit of work for us. And by that I mean I can use it to try and exaggerate some of the shadow areas. That is going to assist me in my watercolor section. So I'm going to pick up the pen again, and for the sketch I'm going to imagine that the light is coming from the top right. I'm just thinking. No, I'm going to have the light coming from the top left because I want my shadows on the bottom and the right hand side, just because I'm right-handed, that's easier. So let's imagine that the sun is coming here. So firstly, let's deal with all of the little wooden sections here. If that is the case, then we're going to have a shadow on the underside. Sorry, I am being silly. If the sun was coming from here, the shadow would be on the underside and on the right hand side. That's exactly what I want to hear, so that's what I'm going to do. This is kind of mostly undercover. It'll probably be all in shadow. Alright, next, what shall I do? I'm going to take my pots. The first thing I'll do is put a bit of shadow under the lip there, and then following the same curve as the pot below, I'm going to do some hatching with the pen. I'll do a little bit on this side, but more on the shadow side, just to accentuate the curve of the pot. Let's do some hatching here. And then I want it to look a little bit woven, so I'll do some lines here. Alright, then let's do the same on these remaining pots. Then I'm going to, these sections of the wood will be shaded by the awning above. So I'm going to just make those lines heavier, that section of each of the lines. And I think I'm going to do the whole door frame just to accentuate that entrance and the door, just to separate it from what's going on in the back there. And then let's also define the bottom of all of these sections. Just send a little bit up there at each join. And the sides. And then maybe the center join. And then I think I'm going to do the bottom of the awning. And I realize I haven't done a door handle, so let me just put one in. Maybe I'll do some texture on the foliage. Hide my mistake down here. These pots that I can see the back of, I can shadow just here at the back. I'll define the corners of the awning. Right, now I think I'm ready to paint. So let me set up my watercolors. Enormously frustratingly, my camera stopped working when I was filming this section here, but it was fairly simple. So let me just explain exactly what I did, and then you'll be able to do it yourself. I wanted to make a very vintage looking color for the walls of the bookshop. So to do that, although I've got it here, I'm just going to do it again. I mixed up Carbazole Violet with a Viridian. You've just got to use whatever you've got available on your palette, but I like the mix of these two together. And if you have a look here, you can see after it having been sitting on the palette for a while, it has granulated into its two colors, which is exactly what I want, because if it does it on the palette, then it's going to do it on the painting as well. So what I did in the painting for all of the sections that have got the wood, I worked wet and wet by putting water down on an area first. I'll explain to you which areas I did together in a moment, but I'm just showing you the effect that I had when I put the paint down. So work an area at a time, water down, pick up your mix, and then dot it in. So although it looks like a lovely gray, bluish grey as you put it on the paper, it will separate into its colors after leaving it for a while. So I purposefully don't do a smooth wash. I dot it down and be irregular with it. I'm not trying to get any shadows or anything at this stage. And already as I put the color down on the page here, you can see it's starting to separate into its green and its purple that I made it up of, which is exactly the look I'm trying to get with this sort of vintage color on the building. So what I've done here is I worked section by section. I put water down on this section here up until the door, and then drop my color in, and then I put water down on the right hand side to drop my color in. I'm not trying to do any shadows or anything at this stage. You can see after it's sitting for a while that the color is separating into its different colors, which is exactly what I want. And then let it dry completely. This is still a bit damp because I finished it just a few minutes ago, and it's not ready for me to do any shadows on. I want to wait until it is completely dry and then come back for the next layer. Right, that's dried enough that I can come and do some shadow now. So I'm going to leave the two front panels as the lightest because they are furthest forward. I'm not going to do anything on them right now. I'm going to put some water down on the side panels. Let me do one at a time. There's no reason to rush. So I'll do this left panel. And I'll just pick up some of that color and glaze a second layer on top. And I'll do the same with this one and the door. Oh, I've gone over the line. Alright, that was poor thinking. I'll come back to that. Let me do the right hand side. Where I can see the water pooling, I'm just tapping off some of the water and lifting it and tapping it on my paper towel. Alright, I just don't want to put my hand into that. I'm going to dry it with a hairdryer quickly. Alright, now I'm going to do this right hand panel and the door. It looks quite dark when I put it down, but you can see from the areas that are already dry, because there's so much water, the water does make it a bit darker, and as the water dries, so the whole thing lightens. And now I'm going to get some of that shadow colour. I think this extra bit that I mixed here needs a bit more green. And I'm just going to put some shadowing on the front-facing panel. I'm using it in a thicker consistency here so that I get a harder shadow. And I'm wanting to do a similar thing on the other panels before I clear this colour off my palette. So I'm just going to let it dry and then come back and do my final bit of shadowing on this before I clear my palette for other things. Alright, that's dry now. So I'm just going to pick up that thicker consistency shadow colour again. Still think it needs green. Alright, I'm going to do some shadowing on the paneling on the other sections. Now what I want to do is I want to do a shadow for the awning would cast on the rest of the wood. So if you want to get your ruler just so that you've got the same height, really I'm concerned about the front panel at the moment. Maybe I'll go down to about here. Right, so just to show what I'm going to do with that, I don't want it too dark, so I'm just watering down what's there. Right, so if I came into this one, I would do it to there, then I would take the same angle up. So I'll do straight across here. This is the inside of the door, so I'm going to take quite a thick consistency of that and put that as a shadow here. And then what I'm going to do, I don't want to waste this shadow colour. Inside the shop here, there's 3 layers of books. There's the ones that are at the window, then there's these few that are on the table, and then there's the ones that are on the bookshelf at the back. I want to shadow all of the ones that are on the bookshelf at the back because they'll be the furthest away and be in shadow, and that'll help me get some depth to the different books that I've got. So just make sure that you are clear for yourself which ones are the ones at the back. We'll do some colour over them later, but having put the shadow colour down first is going to help push them back. Right, so the ones that are at the angle and lying flat are the ones on my table, so everything else is behind. And seeing as how we're talking about shadow anyway, whilst I've still got this colour on my palette, let me add some burnt umber to it just to vary what we've got going on here. Just as long as you've got a slightly different grey. I'm going to use that for the remainder of the inside of the shop. Maybe I will have that mixed with little areas of drop-in areas of new Gamboge, just so it's not all samey. Alright, let's see how we go. Picking up my shadow colour. Just touching my hand on the wet there, just make sure that you don't. You know, there might be ceiling lights here that are causing some light. I'm happy with that. I think whilst it's, I must just blend here if it's making a solid line. Whilst it's drying, I'm going to clear my palette, so I'm just going to use any colours that are here, because we will be looking for different colours for the books later. Just not touching anything I've just worked on. I'm just going to utilise the colours that I've got also just whilst waiting literally for the paint to dry, and put some colours in for some of the books. You can use the same colours for the books on the back shelf as well if it's dry. And having put that base colour down first, the colour will be a bit more muted if we put it on there. If you are enjoying this tutorial and are gaining value from it, please consider making a small donation to me on my Buy Me a Coffee platform. As you can imagine, these tutorials take many hours of work to put together. I appreciate any and all donations, as they help me to continue building this platform. I was just thinking that before I let that shadow colour dry completely, there's one or two things I want to do with it still. I want to use it on the shorter side of the awning because that side will be in shadow. So I'm going to use that, watered down, and I'm going to avoid the lettering. So I'm going to work around the letters. And then I think what I'm going to do is the wall above where we're working. You can really use any colour you like. I'm just going to, what colour should I do? I'm going to do, I've got the new Gamboge there already. And I mix in a bit of Payne's grey into that. I'm using my larger size 8 brush now, just because it's a bigger area. Maybe a little bit more yellow. Alright, I'm going to put that on the wall up in this area. Probably have to move to my smaller brush to do the edges, but let me just get some down. Just picking up my smaller brush for the edges. And just, maybe I want a bit of a fade up at the top, so I'm just rinsing off that bigger brush of mine. Just going to come across the top here. Don't know if that's making it better or worse. And then that shadow colour I'm going to pick up on my smaller brush and just do it down the edges. There we go. What else? Just do the darker side of the basket. Yeah. Alright, let me let that dry. And I'm going to clean off my palette. Alright, let's do a bit of work on the awning now. I think I'm going to do a red and a green stripe to it. I quite like Viridian as a colour because I think it's complementary to the colours that I've got here already. So I'm just going to prepare that, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to work wet and wet. I'm going to do every second stripe green, and I'm going to aim to put more pigment in the top than at the bottom. That I feel that as it comes out it's going to be capturing more light. So let's see how we go. I'll do the second one. If it's too wet, then when I put the colour down it's just going to spread throughout. So I'm just picking up any excess just so that it's wet but not pooling anywhere. Alright, let me pick up my Viridian. Great, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'll put a little bit down here, but I think we're probably going to have to do this bottom layer in a separate layer, otherwise the colour's going to push up. So maybe I should conservatively just leave this bottom section, and although I'll put water on it, I'll come back and do the bottom section in the next layer. Alright, skipping one. So I'm not going to worry too much about the lettering here because I know that I'm going to come down and do this in an additional layer. Getting that Viridian in a thickish consistency, dropping it in up at the top. Alright, and then with that Viridian, I am going to do some of the books. Then I'm going to let that awning dry for a bit. I'm going to work on the terracotta pots, and burnt sienna is the best colour to do that with. So I'm just going to prep the burnt sienna, oh it's quite thick, over there. And then I'm going to work wet and wet, put some, I'll work from left to right. Alright, I'll pick up some of the burnt sienna. I'm going to aim to leave a whitish area about 2/3 of the way across. And then pick up some of the thicker consistency and drop it in on the left again. Alright, let me do the same for the others. If I need to, I'll come back and drop in a thicker consistency again once it's drying, but let's do one layer and see how we go. Alright, so I'm just adding a little, just to intensify that colour on the left, and then blending it to the right. The more we can get the contrast between the darkest colour on the edge to the white, the more three-dimensional it's going to look. I think I'm going to use some yellow ochre on the basket. And let's not forget to use, I don't have much burnt sienna left on my palette, I'll just do a couple of books. Now I'm going to work on these 4 bushes here. I think I'll do them a similar colour. So I'm going to start with Hansa Yellow Light. I just want to almost make it my base colour, so I'm making it really watery, and I'm going to do that on all 4 of them. Then I'm going to mix up a nice fresh green. For that I'm going to mix up some Hansa Yellow Light with a little bit of phthalo blue. That's a nice fresh green. I'm going to dot that in. Alright, I'm going to want that to dry. I suppose what I can do is the little bit of soil that is around those standards. I've got some burnt umber here. I'm just going to get a little bit on my brush and then just do these little bits of soil. Maybe we should also use the burnt umber as the base to these hanging plants. And then I'm going to get that burnt umber and add the slightest bit of Payne's grey in it just to make it darker, and do the stalks of the standards. And we might as well do the table inside. Alright, there's quite a lot going on, so I'm going to let that dry. Alright, I'm going to mix up the red for the awning now. I think I'm going to use a base of new Gamboge. And then to that, I'm going to add some Quinacridone Rose. Yeah, the new Gamboge just makes it not too bright. I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the same effect where I'm going to put water down and then put the stronger pigmented colour at the top. I think maybe before I start though, let me just mix up a bit more of this. Alright, so let's do the same again. I think that the green is dry enough, as well as the surrounding areas, for me to do the Viridian in a darker consistency on the overhang. So I'm going to jump in and do that. And I think I'm going to use a weak consistency of this colour for the lampshade. I'm going to do the whole lampshade that colour, and then I'll come and do a darker colour for the outside in an additional layer. I'm just going to put a hairdryer on the bottom here so that I can do the red of the overhang. I think whilst I give that a few seconds to dry, what I want to do is a small shadow. There's this piece that is part of the brickwork above, and it'll cast a very narrow shadow on the section immediately below. I've got this burnt sienna here. I'm just going to add some ultramarine to it. I think that's actually cobalt. Let me just see. That's fine. I've probably mixed up way too much. So I just want to do a very narrow shadow underneath here. I'm going to need to do a steady hand. And if my page wasn't stuck to the table, I would be turning it 90 degrees. Alright, I've definitely done better shadows than that in my time, but that'll have to do. Alright, I'm going to take the red and just do the overhang. Alright, let's do some darker green on these bushes. I'm going to take Hansa Yellow Light and that phthalo blue again, but I'm going to push it a little bit greener by putting more of the blue, and maybe I'll add a touch of new Gamboge just so that it's not so bright. Alright, I'm going to water that down a little bit and just do some darker contrasts on the bushes. And then I'm just going to smooth some of these edges. And then I'm wondering whether I want to do little flowers in these baskets. That's the reason why I've just been hanging back on that. I think maybe I do want to do some bright red flowers before I do the greenery around. So I'm going to take a bit of Pyrrole Scarlet and just add it to what I've already got here. And just do some little pops of colour. I'd like it darker than that. I'm just going to add some Quinacridone Rose to that to intensify the red. And I'm just going to do some pops of colour. And I'm just going to need to make sure that I allow this to dry completely before I come and do any green on it. Otherwise, it's all going to blend together. Alright, so let's think about the paving stones now. So there's the paving and then there's the sort of cement that's between them all. I think I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's not where my focus of the sketch is at all, but we do need to get some colour. I've already got this colour that's here. Maybe I'm going to water that down hugely, put it across the whole bottom, and then I might drop in some earthy yellow ochres or burnt siennas or something in there as we go. I'll see how we go, but I think I'm going to start firstly with really watered down and just cover the whole paving area with this greyish blue colour. We just had a blip in the power there. I just had to press record again. So I don't think that this has dried much. It's just been about half a minute. I'm just adding some water. Yeah, I'll add some Payne's grey. I'm going to have to do another layer where I'm going to separate the cement from the paving stones. Burnt umber. And then let me just use my smaller brush just to make sure this goes all the way to the edge because it has started drying. But I do like the fact that the colours are mixed and not mixing together. Alright, let's let that dry. Alright, I'm going to take some of, oh that's my big brush. I'm going to take some of the green that I've got there and put it on my hanging flower baskets. Maybe I'm just going to add a bit of Hansa light to that just to lighten it up somewhat. Then I'm going to take my Viridian, which I can take in a thicker consistency, and just do on the outside of the lampshade. Then I'm going to take the grey, which is also in a thicker consistency now. I can even add some Payne's grey to that if I wish. And I'm just going to go in between the paving stones to separate the paving and the cement. And then let's do that little step down. Also, I'm just going to get a slightly darker colour. And I'm just not thrilled with this white overhang. Maybe, I don't know if I'm going to make it better or worse. You've got the benefit of going a few minutes further in this video and seeing. I think I'm going to take really watered down and do underneath. Yeah, I think that's fine. That's neither here nor there. Should we do, just wondering if we should do shadows for the pots. Great, alright, I'm going to let that dry and then decide if I'm done. I've let it dry now and I've decided I'm happy with it. I'm going to call it a day. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, bye for now.